So you should all be able to hear and see me well. I've just had an update on my Zoom. So if you can't hear me, just let me know in the chat and I'll make sure you can. So thank you very much for joining today's webinar. So we're looking at makeup advertising claims in particular today. So how we make advertising claims for makeup, what are the regulations, and some really good examples of how people have done this as well. So when we talk about makeup, it is slightly different. So obviously, a lot of the other cosmetic claims we look at are things like skincare or hair care, because instead of kind of having a long-term benefit that we're trying to prove, it's generally about improving things quite instantly, covering things up essentially, or improving an instant appearance. So that's why I thought it'd be a really good webinar to look at in particular. Just to let you know, today's webinar is being recorded, and I'll be sending out the recording at the end of the session. And also there'll be a chance for a question and answer at the end. So if you've got any questions as we go through it, feel free to put them in the Q&A box, or if you want to use the chat at all and talk to any of the other participants in today, please feel free to do so if you want to share any experience yourself. So today's webinar agenda, we'll be looking at a little bit of an overview of the makeup industry, just to give us a sort of thought of why it's an important industry and why we want to talk about it. I'll be looking at global regulations for advertising, so kind of looking quite generally about why we need to have claims and what the regulations are behind those. And then obviously claim substantiation. So how do we give substance to those claims? How do we validate them? What are the methods to do that? And then I'll be sharing some case studies, which will be a great example of what that looks like as well. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Carys and I'm the Regulatory Director at Ayton Global Research. So we're a consumer research company, therefore the regulations I specialise in are anything to do with how our research is conducted, but also how it might be used. So generally advertising regulations are certainly my speciality. And a lot of global cosmetic regulations are what I need to keep my kind of finger on the pulse on to make sure that every study we design is going to be compliant and you're going to be able to use it as you need to. So always feel free to reach out to me if you have any projects in mind, and I'll be happy to kind of provide a consultation along that as well. So overview of the makeup market. What does it look like and where is it going? So I always like to take a couple of snippets from market research that's been put out there recently, just to give us an idea of what's currently happening in this particular part of the cosmetics industry. So generally, makeup has been regarded as harmful to the skin. Well, obviously it kind of can clog pores, it can cause things that aren't necessarily beneficial. So, foundation is often people are looking for things like oil-free, non-comedogenic, or however you say it, and making sure we're not blocking up that skin. But generally, yeah, it's not seen as something that's very beneficial to the skin. It does mean that the industry is kind of going towards a halal, natural, and organic face makeup product direction, because they're looking for things that provide either moisturizing, antiseptic, antibacterial, or anti-inflammatory property. So obviously trying to negate any of those negative effects that you do get from wearing makeup every day. Mordor Intelligence also have this lovely image that I've kind of put from their website there, where they did this market research that I've quoted as well. And it says the largest market is obviously North America, but the fastest growing is Asia Pacific. Now, if you're watching my other webinars, that is generally a trend across the cosmetics industry and actually many of the FMCG industries. So Asia Pacific is kind of becoming more wealthy. There's more drive for consumers to buy products. So yeah, it's definitely a huge market to keep your eye on. But at the moment, North America is unsurprisingly the leader. And there's also the five top leaders in the makeup market in particular as well, with L'Oreal, Revlon, Clarins, Estée Lauder, and Shiseido. These aren't surprising. We see these names everywhere. So they're the kind of the leaders at the moment, and potentially where you might want to look at putting your brand. But yeah, so Mordor Intelligence are also talking about the fact that consciousness of physical appearance across millennial women in particular is having a huge key driver. So things like social media, stuff like that is making people more aware of, wanting to look their best, or, being more self-conscious, which isn't necessarily a good thing, but obviously it's good for the makeup market. That is a huge key driver. And also, again, they're also kind of commenting on the fact that organic products are huge, and that digital media are also, and social media, it is helping grow awareness of brands. So as we know, a lot of influencers will sell makeup products and things like that. So yeah, it's just definitely a good age for the makeup market. So before I kind of go into things about makeup specifically, I want to make sure we're all on the same page. So if you watched my webinar last week about skincare, it's going to be a little bit similar for the next few slides, but it will go specifically into makeup. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page of what an advertising claim is. When we're talking about making claims for makeup, what are we talking about in particular? So claims are obviously used to market your product. They'll appear on any kind of communication, anything you're saying about your product that the public can see, that the consumers can see, is a claim, whether it's on your website, your social media, your TV, your pack. It's obviously anything you're putting out there. And this is because it describes the effect of the product and helps consumers to choose it. So, you know, if you have makeup and you say it's a mascara, it's lengthening lashes, this is a claim, but it lets, you know, consumers know that if they want longer lashes, that's the one for them. So it's really important to have those claims on there so both your consumers can understand it. But also, as I've put on here, it's to help you stand out as well, and make you look better than your competition. So obviously, if you have a lengthening mascara, there's lots and lots and lots of lengthening mascaras out there. So what else can you claim about your product to make it more appealing to consumers? So that's what we're also thinking about as well, because there's hundreds of makeup products on the market. And also you can use the claims in your advertising to really pick you up above that competition as well. So as you can see from the examples on this page, we've got percentages of people agreeing with things. It's going to make it more attractive. If you have, like I said, if you are all saying lengthening mascara in your competition, if you're saying, yeah, but 98% of people agree that's like lengthening, it just really puts substance to that claim and really helps boast what your product can do and make you look like you've got your advertising together and your marketing together, maybe more than your competition do. But how is it regulated? So again, I don't want to kind of go into it too much, but I think it's really important to have an overview before we kind of go into substantiated claims. Who's actually looking at the substantiation? Why is it important? And who do you need to be aware of if you're going to be marketing your product? Because like I said, it's all very well and good to say, okay, well, I'm going to say this about my product, but we need to make sure we're being compliant. And we also need to make sure that we're aware of what that is to be compliant. So every product, no matter what category it is, whether it's makeup or skincare or any like a toy or a gambling site, it all comes under ad self-regulation. It doesn't matter what it is. It's something that's being sold to the public. So what ad self-regulation is, why is it self-regulation is because it's not necessarily someone coming around and checking every product you put on the market and saying, right, there's that claim. Is it substantiated? What is the evidence? That would be, be just impossible at the rate that the FMCG market moves. So what you have is advertising standards authorities. So in the UK, it's the Advertising Standard Authority. It changes for different countries because each country has their own. They'll put out a code of conduct that will say, this is the rules. If you're going to advertise in this country, this is what you have to abide by. And then once you kind of read that, you abide by it. If you don't abide by it, it's not a case of saying, okay, well, I'm not going to do it. It's not really worth it. I'm just going to say it anyway. It works on a complaints basis. So obviously, if you say you've got a lengthening mascara, and you haven't done any testing or any substantiation behind it, your consumer goes and buys your mascara and goes, God, this doesn't work at all. I've not noticed any difference to my lashes. I'm really not happy with it. They'll complain to the advertising standards in their country, and then they will investigate it and see what your substantiation is. So consumers are one side you have to worry about. The other side you have to worry about is your competitors. Because if you have a mascara that says 10 times longer lashes and your competition's only managed to get 5 times longer lashes, they're going to question it and go, how have they managed to get that much longer lashes? Because we haven't managed to do it. So they'll be the ones that complain about your product as well. And then again, it goes through that process. What happens if you get a case upheld by these advertising standards? They will ask you to remove your advert, which of course cannot be the worst thing ever, because you can remove it from your website or whatever. But you think about how detrimental that could be if it's on your pack copy, if you have to do a whole product recall, and also how bad it is on your reputation, because these things aren't kept private. As soon as you've got a case with an advertising standard authority, it is public knowledge, which is really bad rep. So it's really important to make sure you're abiding by all of these regulations, and being on top of it, and not kind of just hoping for the best with your adverts. So the International Chamber of Commerce, a couple of links there for you. The ICC, they have got a framework which countries can adopt. So you can have a little look on there and see who has adopted that framework, because if all the countries that you're advertising in have adopted that, you know it's going to be quite similar. I mean, generally, I will say most countries follow a very similar pattern, but you do need to be aware of what it is in each country, because there can be different cultural aspects as well in terms of what you're allowed to put into your advertising. So be very, very cautious. For example, in China recently, they've cracked down on people that are making cosmetics look like food. Because otherwise there could be an issue where consumers might go, oh God, that looks delicious, I'm going to eat it. And it's not, it's dangerous to eat cosmetics. So we don't do that. So they have now got a kind of rule against that. So for example, every country is slightly different. International Council of Advertising Standards, or ICAS. Again, they are a council. They have many members from across the globe that have very shared ideologies about advertising standards. So it's a really good place to look about what advertising standards you need to abide by. So there's a real overview of advertising standards. I wanted to talk about cosmetics now in particular. So again, I'm going to pick out the ASA, because everyone has their different codes. But to be honest, the ASA are a shining example of an advertising authority, because they lead a lot of example as well. And generally, we're pretty strict in the UK compared to some countries. So I do always kind of say, especially to my North American clients, go by the UK, because if you want to export over here, you want to make sure you've done that. If you abide by the UK, you're almost definitely compliant in the USA. So always go by the UK standards and not anything lower. So what they think about cosmetics in particular. So you must hold appropriate and adequate scientific evidence to substantiate an efficacy claim. So does the product work, a performance claim for the product, whether explicit or implied. So really important there, because you can have an implied claim. It's not the same as an explicit claim as saying, this makes your skin radiant, okay? An implied claim might be having imagery in your advert that shows skin glowing and, and then saying to buy your product. That's still an implied claim, because using that imagery is saying that it is going to have that effect. So it's really, really tricky. And like I said, it's so important to make sure you do have the evidence, because it's so easy to get tripped up. So the key is to focus on the cosmetic effect on consumers in general. So if you think about how the cosmetic effect is going to affect every person, then that's how you should be wording your claim. Sorry, I've worded that really badly. And you should always hold robust evidence if it's anything that's beyond a simple cosmetic effect. What am I trying to say there? Basically, if a shampoo is going to shampoo your hair, it's slightly different. You don't need to have as robust evidence behind it, because a shampoo is a surfactant, it will shampoo your hair. If you want to say that the shampoo removes dandruff, now you need robust evidence, because you're fixing a problem or looking at a problem. So that's where we need to have more robust evidence. It's also important to think about designing a study which has time points. If you've got a cumulative claim, if you're using a time point within your claim, obviously the study needs to reflect that. Sounds very obvious, but we'll look a little bit about that in study design. Be careful you don't make a medicinal claim. This isn't as common with makeup as it might be for skincare or hair care in particular, but it's still something to be really wary of. So obviously you couldn't say, you might use a concealer for a blemish. I very much doubt you'd say that it would heal acne, but if you did, that's obviously fixing a skin problem. So that would be a medicine and it wouldn't be a cosmetic product. The name in itself may be a claim as well. So you need to make sure it's substantiated. So as I used that example earlier about radiance, you could have like radiance moisturizer or something like that. Well, you said it's radiant, you need to get it substantiated. So it's just being incredibly cautious that anything you put out there in your marketing, is probably going to come under scrutiny. And so you do need to make sure you know what these codes are, and you need to make sure you're holding evidence behind your claims. So in terms of cosmetics in particular, we want to look at what the regulation is there. So the advertising standards are the one that are looking at all adverts, doesn't matter what category you are. And then your cosmetic regulation, again, applicable for which country or countries you're selling in, is going to have its own regulation and advice about claims as well. Just gonna have a sip of my drink a second. So the cosmetics regulation, I've chose the EU as an example because I think they're a real leader again in cosmetics, and a lot of countries really do replicate these regulations. So in my experience, when it comes to cosmetic claims, no matter where I am looking at substantiating claims for my clients, these 6 common criteria really apply no matter where you're selling. So as I said, every country is different, but I think that these are really applicable across the globe. So these 6 common criteria, just to break them down, we have legal compliance. So obviously your product must be compliant with the EU regulations. So we need to make sure that with any cosmetic regulation, it's always a thing, but we cannot use it as a claim as well. So if you said on your product compliant with the EU regulation, that wouldn't be allowed because it can be denigrating. It can look like other products don't abide with the right regulations. I saw one the other day, so I just had an example in my head. I saw an example the other day for an eyelash growth serum, and it said that other products had not been ophthalmologically tested. I can never say that word. And I thought it was quite denigrating. I thought that's not true, because especially sort of in the EU, you have to get the right safety testing applicable for the product. So by saying that, it made it look like other products on the market weren't safe to use and that theirs was. And actually that was incredibly naughty, essentially, and unfair. So what we're trying to do, as I said, is always with this making claims, we need to make sure we're being fair to our consumers and fair to our competition. So by making claims like that, it's really not good. You should always be truthful. Again, it sounds so obvious, doesn't it? But it needs, basically, again, it's to do with making sure we don't exaggerate claims. We need to be very truthful about what is in there. So for example, it could be that you have a lipstick which has got shea butter in it, so obviously that's very moisturizing. We need to make sure that it has a level, it actually has shea butter in it, or it does have a level of active ingredient that is actually going to be perceived by the consumer. So we need to be very truthful there. You need to have evidential support, over egging the pudding a little bit, but that is obviously going to be a huge part of the webinar today, and I'll be going through some case studies of how we get that evidential support. You need to be honest. And again, it needs to be, again, that's quite obvious again, but you see when you have things like over a million consumers enjoyed this product, and it might not be that there's a million customers, but there's a million units sold or something like that. So it can be those really big sweeping claims that people love to make and don't necessarily have the right, they're not being honest about the actual figures. You need to be fair to your competition. So again, it might be something like, oh, this mascara lengthens lashes more than this brand, but that brand might not be a lengthening mascara. It might be a different kind of mascara that has a different effect. So that wouldn't be fair on our competition. And at the end of the day, all of these come together because we want our consumers to be able to make an informed decision about purchasing our product. So if we have all of these together, the consumer should be able to go, okay, I want volumizing mascara. I'm on mascara today. Volumizing mascara, that's the brand for me. Okay, great. And I can purchase it. And that's really what it should be about. Obviously, in the EU, the responsible person is the person that is responsible for the claims and making sure that they abide by all of these 6 common criteria. It does differ in certain countries, but obviously a lot of countries have a very similar system where there's a person that is going to review the claims and make sure they're happy that they're compliant. In terms of types of claims then, because I'm now going into a bit more about how we're going to make these claims for our makeup specifically. So not necessarily the regulation, but what can we say about our product and how do we substantiate that and how do we use it to our best ability? So when you start formulating a claim, a really good starting point, and this is from the CTPA, is to think about what kind of claim you are making. It's really important because it will sort of help you make that decision on what substantiation you need behind it as well. So always have a think about what the kind of claims are that you're making. So sensory claims and actually product aesthetic claims comes into this as well. Anything to do with the initial look or feel of the product and the packaging itself. And it could be the fragrance as well. That's all going to be your sensory claims. Then performance claims. This is again something you'll see probably the most in skincare, but also in makeup as well. I don't know why I said skincare, because obviously makeup's the same. What does the product achieve? What does it do? What's the efficacy behind it? Lengthening mascara, moisturizing lipstick, full coverage foundation. These are all the kinds of claims that can be performance claims. Ingredient claims, I mentioned that earlier, our shea butter lipstick, it needs to have that ingredient in it. But obviously you can use your ingredients to make claims as well. Obviously you need to state, unless you've got the evidence on the final product, you need to state that it's that ingredient that's had that evidence behind it. But it certainly can be really appealing for sort of on-trend ingredients if you want to use them. Combination claims, I wouldn't say I see this as much in makeup industry. It's more in skincare and hair care, where you'll say, this product works best when used with this other product. I suppose you see it in mascara, where you have the primer that you use first, then the mascara. That could be a combination claim. But basically, in that case, you need to have proof the products work best together. You can't just sort of say it to hope to make more money, essentially. There has to be some substance behind that. Comparison claims, talked about this a bit earlier as well. This product is better than this product, but it can also work with your own formulations. New and improved formula is quite a common one. So it's great to do a comparison study to make sure, again, that it's actually improved and that you're not just saying it and that it's just a new formula. Subjective claims, this is anything to do with what someone can, what someone can only determine themselves, their opinion. It's what we look at in consumer research, so I'll be talking about it a lot. And it could be things like, I feel more confident, this is the best coverage I've used. These are all things that, they're not measurable by science, but they're something that someone can perceive themselves. And the objective claims, this is science, that 5 times longer lashes, that has to be objective. A consumer can't use a mascara and go, yeah, my lashes are exactly 5 times longer. It doesn't work like that. They can say my lashes appear lengthened, but they can't use those exact measurements. That can only be done via an instrumental study. And I'm going to talk about these methods of substantiation in a little bit more detail. But first I want to talk about, once you've thought about where your claim lies, how do you find the relevant claim for your product? This is so important. I have so many people that will come to me with a product and they'll say, what claims can we say about it? Well, there's no one size fits all with claims. If there was, there would be no point. Like I said, how are you going to stand out in front of your competition if every person says the same claims? Yes, there can be similarities, but never look, always start fresh. Don't think about what everyone else is doing, apart from to check what's working in the industry. So always start with the formulation. Why have you formulated this product? There's always a reason, there's always something that's the product is going to do, that it's going to achieve, an effect you're going to get from it. The lengthening mascara, again, that is the formulation. It's been formulated to do that. So that's our claim. Then think about your target group and think about what their needs are and what you can give back to them. So you can look at doing this by looking at your current customers. That's quite common. So people sort of saying, oh, I love this mascara, but I wish it did this. Then you might look at formulating a mascara that does that. But you can also look at research, market research. So we can conduct bespoke studies that will go, okay, this is your consumer. This is who you want to reach out to. This is the product you're formulating. Now, what do they want out of it? You can look at your own product experiences and see what's kind of led there. And also you can compare with your competition, see what the gaps are in the market and what you can help to achieve with it. Also look at their successes and their failures. So again, there's no harm in jumping on a trend. It happens a lot. I just would say don't rely on a trend, but you can see what's working in the market. But certainly with failures, what has been said about products that hasn't worked. And this can really work in a compliance sense as well. So as I was talking about the ASA earlier, you can look on their website and it shows all the cases. So it's a really good point to look. If you think, oh God, why is no one saying this claim? This is such a good claim. It's amazing. And it might be because it's completely uncompliant. There's loads of people that have been called up on it. So it's always good to look at the failures as well to make sure, A, you're doing something different and new and good that's going to be successful, but B, that you're going to be compliant. Then we want to think about making an effective claim, because we've thought about all these claims, but now we need to really think about, is it going to work? Is it going to make it a strong one? So again, once we've decided what our consumers are saying, and again, this is important to then break it down and go, instead of going kind of off on a tangent, because this can happen, it's going, right, so I can see all of this information, I've got all of this data from this market research, I've looked at the market as a whole, now how do I make sure it's going to be strong? Think about what's in it for the consumer. What are they going to get out of your product? What can your product actually deliver? So again, you might have had your formulation and then gone off on a tangent and gone, oh, but everyone's asking for this kind of product. Well, it might not be that your product can do that. So again, revert it back. What can you actually deliver? Does it support your brand strategy and your story? Does it support the overall message that you're giving to your consumers? Because again, you want to make sure that you've still got a really strong brand and that you're not just focusing on the product itself. Can you implement it sales wise? Because obviously, again, we need to think about what we can actually sell and what we can actually give to our consumers. What can we produce and what's going to work? And of course, can you support it? Can you validate the claim? Because that is going to make sure that it's compliant. So claim substantiation. As I mentioned, I'm going to go into it in a little bit more detail. So we're going to look at two kind of overall branches, just to make it nice and simple today. So one is our clinical claim substantiation. This is where I was talking about instrumental studies. So we have three methods: in vivo, ex vivo, and in vitro. What do they mean? In vivo is on a person. Ex vivo is person, but well, I can't think what you call it, like a person's bio something, but off the body. So it could be like hairdressers. And in vitro is kind of man-made on petri dish or something like that. So, you see a lot of safety testing that's vegan. That would be an in vitro test, because we're replicating something very similar to human substance and performing tests on it. But really, in vivo is going to be our main one for makeup. So that's what we'll talk about in a bit more detail. So it's anything that's using an instrument or biochemical technique. So again, for makeup, it's generally instrumental. We're looking at identifying things like the growth in lashes or something like that. It generates objective data, which can be used to support your quantitative performance and ingredient claims. Quantitative performance, by the way, is our consumer studies, like on a large range of people. There's quantified data, and it looks at supporting that. There's lots of techniques that are already available. It's quite easy with clinical research. You say, I want to get my claim lengthened lashes substantiated. There'll be a technique that's already recognized to do that. And generally, we want to make sure that the samples are blinded. That is very applicable to both consumer and clinical research. We need to remove a bias. So having no branding on it and just looking at the product itself is how we can do that. Consumer research then, which is what we're going to be talking about in the case studies in particular, also known as in-use tests. They're based just on the consumer perception of the product. So as I said, it might be something my lashes appear lengthened, but then we also go into those more marketing claims, which is, I have dramatic length to my lashes. Now that's something that we can't do objectively because it's dramatic. That's not a measurement. So that's the sort of thing we're looking at in consumer studies. So people would test the product at home because we want to reflect the actual use of the product. So instead of having someone apply the mascara and doing all of these things, that's not going to happen in the real world. In the real world, someone's going to buy your product. They're going to use it at home. So we want to make sure we're replicating that exactly, because that will be the truest to our marketing claims that we can be. So they can also assess multiple products. We talked about that combination or comparison claims. This can all be done during this as well. And as I said, you might need additional evidence, because if you do want to get those measurements, those 5 times longer, that's not going to be possible for a consumer claim. So often, I'll talk to clients, we'll do a bit of a gap analysis. So you might have your product claims that you have in mind, and we can go, right, there's 2 different routes to this. Either we can change the wording to make sure we can substantiate it with consumer research data, or we can go down to having both clinical and consumer research. Essentially, it always comes down to budget. So that's why we choose consumer research. It's a hugely reasonable cost in comparison. You think with an instrumental study, you're going to have a different study for every single thing you want to measure. It will take a long time. With consumer research, we can ask the consumers to evaluate as many claims as we like. So just one study that we're putting out there. It's also a lot quicker. We haven't got to get a lab scheduled. We haven't got people to come in. They get certain things at home, so it gets done pretty immediately. Again, we're affecting those actual conditions of the product in use, but it also allows you to target a wider range of consumers. So we want to target your exact consumer, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's just one group. It could be different countries. It could be different ethnicities. It could be different skin types, hair types. And that's very tricky to get when people are visiting a lab. Whereas if we're sending the products out, it doesn't really matter. And as I mentioned there, you can do multi-country and language studies, and that's going to be really important if you're looking at global expansion. You can also gather other marketing materials alongside it, all in that one study again, like video testimonials, written testimonials, photos, anything like that, we can get through it. So it's really our kind of go-to. Whenever I'm talking to a new client, we start with the consumer research. What can we do with that? Because it's going to be the easiest, it's going to be the quickest, and it's going to be the cheapest. And then we look at doing the clinical research we might have to do, or maybe we don't have to do any. So that's fantastic. So what does that look like? Because it's all very well and good saying how that all works, but a case study is always the best way to go through what substantiating a product claims actually looks like. So I chose this natural brand as one of my case studies because that's what we were saying at the beginning. In the makeup market is kind of a huge driver at the moment within the makeup industry. So let's choose that as a really good example of how we can substantiate claims. So this beauty brand is high-performing luxury makeup that is organic and sustainable. So we're kind of ticking both sides of the spectrum. It's going to get on the organic route, but also it's high-performing. So liquid foundation. They wanted to substantiate their advertising claims, but we also looked at comparing against two of their competitors to see how they sat within that market. So we chose two leading brands and did a direct comparison against those foundations as well. And we wanted to gauge the perception of the organic formula as well. So we wanted to go, it's organic. How does that formula sit with these consumers? So how did we recruit for this? Who did we send this product out for? So female was the only market they were interested. They're just interested in female consumers. 18 to 65, a huge age range because they wanted to see how it worked across all these age ranges as well. They had to be luxury brand users. So again, the competitors that they're sitting within are going to be luxury, and so are they. They've got a higher price point. We want to make sure we've got people that usually use a higher price point foundation, because if someone uses quite a cheap one, they get a really good luxury brand, there's going to be that kind of sway and bias towards the luxury brand anyway. So we want to make sure we're kind of reflecting that user from the get-go. And we split it into skin tones. So generally an even split into light, medium and dark. Then we had the participants select their exact shade, because this brand in particular has lots and lots and lots of different shades. That's a great selling point for them to appeal to a huge diverse range of consumers. So we kind of split it up and then said, you select which shade is your exact tone, and then we can send that to you. So what were the test conditions? So it was an even rotation study. What does that mean? It basically means that half of the consumers, we had the whole of the consumers split into half. So half of them tested against, it was Armani. The other half tested against Estee Lauder. And basically of those halves, we split it in half again. So half of them tested the brand that we are doing the study for, and the other half tested the competitor first, then they switch. Now that's really important because we don't want to have a bias for whatever foundation they used first. We want it to kind of randomize the data a little bit to make sure we get that true comparison. So they used each product for a week because they only had 2 products in the end, and they used the product for a week and used it in place of their normal foundation. So then we had the product usage directions. And again, as I said, this needs to reflect what's going to be on your pack copy so we can get that actual use. The application is obviously the face. And again, we have our safety precautions that are going to be in line with cosmetic vigilance to make sure we're doing the whole thing and keeping our consumers safe. So once we sent out those products to those target consumers and they tested them, what did we get? How did they get those claims? So we obviously have a whole questionnaire which analyzes everything we wanted to talk about. I've only selected 4 questions of the questionnaire just to give you a little teaser today. But this comes at the end of our report. So we get this table, which is Appendix 1, we call it, which is a whole summary of all the results. So as you can see, we've got our questions on the left, the number of people that had a satisfied, a neutral, or a not satisfied answer, and then the percentage of people that had a satisfied, neutral, or not satisfied answer. So what are some of the claims that they managed to achieve with this? Well, 86% said that the foundation blends seamlessly. 88% said it felt lightweight on their skin. 89% said it provides a healthy glow, and 79% said they couldn't believe it was certified organic. So this is where I was saying as well, we had the performance claims, but we also wanted to look at that marketing. Are people surprised it's organic? What's their feedback there? So yeah, it kind of shows you that you can get a whole range of claims and research feedback on the product from doing these studies as well. So what does it look like when we've had our study conducted? How would people then use their claims? So I've got some examples for you. And this particular brand, Vice, I think that's how you say it. They've used their liquid foundation consumer results on their website. So obviously they have this big image which shows the percentage of people that agree with things. So feeling like weights, performs as well as the leading prestige liquid foundation. So they would have done a comparison there to see if it performs as well. People saying it feels soothing, it provides a healthy glow, it's hydrating as their normal moisturizer. Fantastic claims that are really going to boost up the sales. And you can see they've got those consumer study results again in their kind of text as well, really boosting them. And then before and after photos and things like that, again, just to really show that marketing. So fantastic use of their results to really boast what's so good about this brand. It's going to help it stand out against similar products. Another kind of example I've used here is Bare Minerals Lashtopia. So again, they've got their before and after photos. They've got on their social media about longer looking lashes in 8 weeks. And they've got their claims on their website for people saying it made their lashes look fuller, helped to build their desired volume, and it separated their lashes, lifted their lashes. Lashes feel soft and plush and fanned out and fluttery. These are all lovely consumer perception claims they can use. I'm also going to share my other screen and show you how people have used these consumer study results, again, for mascara. That's why mascara is on my mind, because I've been looking at these case studies. I've shared a mascara. Sorry, 2 seconds while I work my life out. So consumer study results on QVC for mascaras. I've got 2 examples that I just want to share with you very quickly.
Lashes longer, stretching the look of your lashes wider and fuller for volume. We even did a consumer survey, yes, on our superhero mascara, and every single person said that their lashes looked lush and incredibly intense.
Oh,
I love that one.
Hello, drama.
And that their eyes appeared more wide open, and that their eyes appeared larger, and they even saw a fuller looking lash line.
100% across the board.
Every single person. So what that means.
So that's for It Cosmetics. As you can see, that really helps them super sell what they're looking at for their mascara there. And then also Too Faced Better Than Sex mascara.
We have some studies that we can show you. Let's talk about this.
Yes. Okay. So in recent consumer perception surveys, so after day 1, 100% felt their lashes appeared longer. 100% felt the mascara thickens lashes at the base and lengthens at the tip. After week 1, 100% felt this mascara provided a dramatic volume and length. That's a lot of 100% across the board.
That's like A+.
A++++.
And then some.
Yes.
So as you can see, that's 2 amazing mascaras that have managed to get their 100% on their claims they then used on QVC and really boosted it. I have to say, I really like the Better Than Sex mascara as an example of what we call puffery with a claim. So obviously we didn't have to do a comparison study to see if it is actually better than sex. That would be inappropriate, and also not really comparing like for like. So there is something you call puffery within advertising, which is things like that. You know, Red Bull gives you wings, all of these examples, there is a chance there. So it's knowing what is appropriate to be like, what would be taken as being very literal and what wouldn't be taken that way. So looking quickly at a beauty brand, looking at a mascara case study, because we've just shown how they're using their results there. But again, how do we then do these studies to make sure we can substantiate them? So this is a waterproof mascara. It's a leading global brand that are looking at testing it, and they essentially want to just substantiate the perception claims and assess the efficacy of the product in actual use conditions, because again, they might have some clinical data about this study, but they want to make sure they've got the actual use recorded as well. So the panel for this one, female again, 18 to 28 years old, a bit of a younger age range. They need to use waterproof mascara already because that's what we're testing. They have to use a waterproof eye makeup remover because we want to look at how well it removes. They need to wear it for at least 8 hours every day because we want to look at the long wearability of the product. And they need to expose their face to water. So waterproof mascara, we need to assess whether it is waterproof or not. So they had to wear the mascara for at least 8 hours every day, as we mentioned. They had to expose their face to water at least once, either by swimming or going in the shower. The usage directions, again, we're looking at reflecting that pack copy, and the rest, again, is very, very similar. We're making sure we're reflecting the actual use and reflecting the pack copy that's going to be used. So this one's obviously a little bit different because we have certain conditions that we need the product to be tested in to make sure the product is getting assessed in that way. And what did the results look like in this case? So did people agree that the product was waterproof? 95%, hugely popular. Do you agree that mascara is capable of withstanding tough conditions? 95%. 94% said it effectively volumized the lashes, and 98% said it was long wearing, which is fantastic because they had to wear it for those 8 hours every day. So we know that 98% of people thought that at the end of the day, it still looked fabulous, which is great. I've actually used this particular mascara and I'm wearing it right now, and I have to say it does definitely last 8 hours. So just to summarize before we go to a question and answer, it is essential to use advertising claims to stand out against your competition. So as mentioned, if it all feels like it's a lot to kind of think about all of these things, well, if you're going to sell your makeup brand, you'll have to make these kind of claims because you want to stand out. It's so important for success of your brand. You need to make sure your study is well designed, and that is what we can help with in the questionnaire and everything so that it can be valid and valuable. Make sure your data is compliant in the territory you're actually selling in. So as I said, make sure you're looking at those rules and regulations for each territory. Always present your evidence clearly in your advertising to avoid scrutiny. So this is a good example on here where it says in a consumer study with 56 respondents on 14 attributes over 2 weeks, and the other one was on a consumer study with 108 respondents over 2 weeks. So it's really important that we're presenting that quite clearly to not get scrutiny, and always make sure it's recent. Don't kind of formulas change over time. Things will become uncompliant. So we need to make sure we're staying up to date. So I feel like I've talked at you for a long time. So please let me know if you've got any questions. I'd love to see some questions coming in. If you've got anything you'd like to ask. I know it's a lot to take in as well. I get so excited about things like this. I love makeup and I love doing the test for it and everything like that, and seeing new claims come in. So I'll give you guys a second, hopefully get some questions in. But if not, I will be sharing my email address as I usually do at the end of this webinar. So if you've got any questions or you want to discuss any particular projects, once it's over, feel very, very free to do that. Can't see any questions coming in, so I'll wrap it up for today. So just want to finish off and say that we're very proud to be sponsoring the IFSCC Congress in September next year. Please join us there and register your interest at their website now. Oh, sorry, I keep clicking on the wrong thing. I have one more webinar left this month. So that's going to be the spotlight on wellness and emotive claims in a couple of weeks' time. So if there's anything that you've got coming up project-wise for wellness and emotive, sorry, I've got a question come in. So that's great. I'll have a look. So if the active ingredients are not at a functional level but exist, how do we market it? Well, if in that case, there's not really much you can do. Now, I don't know the regulations exactly about how much has to be in your product at an active level. It depends on the products. But absolutely, at the end of the day, if you haven't got enough of that product in there, you can't use those claims. So what we generally do is we test the final product anyway. Even if my clients want to use ingredient claims, they'll tend to test the final product. It gives you more freedom with how you can word your claims. So you don't have to say this contains shea butter, which is moisturizing. You can just say the lipstick is moisturizing. And 80% of people agree the lipstick's moisturizing. You don't need to rely on that ingredient claim. So it's very much the case if you have the same thing where you have an ingredient in there, but it's not at a high level to use the claim, you just test the final product and you use the claim that way. So I hope that helps. But yeah, so hopefully I'll see you on the 23rd of September. There's my contact information there. I can see the chat's coming up. I'll answer this one question and then I'll just ask people to email me because I don't want to hold everyone up too much longer. But I'll say, have you seen regulators scrutinize waterproof supported by consumer perception rather than clinical study data? Absolutely. I think it's one of those claims in particular that needs to have some kind of body of evidence behind it. In this particular example that I've used today, they did have clinical research as well, but it was on a very small panel of people in an instrumental study. They wanted to use the claims on a wider basis, so they needed to have more participants on the study. And they also wanted to assess the actual use of the product and how people agree with it. So there is that case of kind of, for me, it's always about having, when you've got strong claims like things like waterproof, which is a strong thing to say, you do want to have a body of evidence behind it. There are ways of wording questions like this. If you do just have the budget for a consumer study, you can't do it down the road of a clinical study. We can look at wording the claims in a way that isn't so strong, but we can still do through perception data. So we kind of look at that on a case-by-case basis. I've just seen a question come in to say, what type of claims do you have to test clinically? That is the never-ending question, I'll be honest. We look at every claim as a case-by-case basis. As I said, it might be we change the wording, it might be we go down the clinical route, but it really depends on what the product is, what you want to say about it exactly in the claim, and the kind of evidence you already have as well. So sometimes there's clinical evidence behind the ingredient, and then we would use the consumer evidence to further substantiate that. I keep saying I'm going to do one more question. Actually, just keep getting the questions in. I'm happy if people need to leave, they can leave, but I'm happy to answer these. So what types of claims can you not support with consumer data? This is what I was saying before, anything that is objective. So as I mentioned before, if it's got a measurement or, if it says 5 times longer lashes, you would not be able to support that with consumer research data because it suggests an instrumental measurement. So we can't kind of say to consumers, do your eyelashes look 5 times longer? That would be unreasonable, but we can say that the lashes look longer. That's absolutely fine. So it really, again, it's kind of that circle to say it does depend on the claim and it always depends on the evidence that already exists. And just another question in there about what would you say is a minimum sample size? Colleen, please, can you give me an email after this? I've got a whole webinar about panel sizes. It sounds like a lot, but it's really, really helpful because there is no flat rule. But me and my colleague Thomas, we go through some of the decisions that we would make to make sure we have a good panel size, essentially. So yeah, if you drop me an email, just to remind me after this, I'll email the recording so you'll have it, and then I can send that over to you. But thank you so much for listening, everyone. I'm going to send over the recording, so I'm not going to answer another question. But please feel free to email me. But I'm going to I'll email over the recording. You'll have my contact information on there. And in the meantime, have a lovely rest of your day, and I hope to see you in my next webinar. Thank you.